Hello students, today in this lecture we'll start with coplanar force system. First we'll discuss about types of force systems, then how to find out resultant of coplanar force system, and then we'll start solving problems of resultant of concurrent, parallel and general force system, which one is included in almost all universities, right, in engineering mechanics. How to find out resultant of concurrent, parallel and general force system. First one, coplanar force system is what? You must know force system is what. Before that one you must know force, right? How will define a force? Some external agency which when applied on a body may start its motion if initially it is at rest, or if body is in motion, then if it comes to rest by applying such external agency is called as what? Force. SI unit of force is what? Newton. With Newton from here we will get, or 1 Newton force means how much? How will decide? Suppose this one is what? A body. This one is one body having its mass equal to m kg, and some external force F is applied. All you know Newton's law, and F equal to what? M into A. All you know this equation. All you are brilliant, right? F equal to ma. Now unit of mass is what? Kg. Unit of mass kg. Unit of acceleration is meter per second square. So kg meter per second square means what? Newton, right? The unit of force is what? Newton. How will define a force of 1 Newton? It is such a force which when applied on a body of mass 1 kg and it accelerates with 1 meter per second square, then the applied force is what? 1 Newton. Mass is what? 1 kg. So acceleration of this block, if we measure and it comes out to be 1 meter per second square, then the force is what? 1 Newton. That means it is such a force which when applied on a body of mass 1 kg, body accelerates with 1 meter per second square. Clear? This one mostly all you know, right? You have studied in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Now to define a force completely, whenever we will represent now in our mechanics, applied mechanics, engineering mechanics, right? Force whenever we will represent, 3 points are very important. Suppose I will represent a force. So this one is a force means F represents what? Magnitude of force. This is what? Magnitude. Where force is acting this point, say it is acting on some body, right? And this point is what? A. So point A is called as what? Where force is acting means what? Point of application. It is called as point of application of force, right? Now force is acting. It is acting in which direction is important? That may be rightward, that may be upward, leftward, downward, incline at any angle. Means what is important? This angle is important, or this is called as what? Direction. That means to define a force completely, we must know number 1, magnitude of force. Number 1 is magnitude. Number 2 is what? Direction. And number 3 is what? Point of application. Point of application. Point of application of force. Whenever you will represent force, always concentrate whether you are represented all these 3 points: magnitude, direction and point of application. Ready? To define a force completely, we must know its magnitude, direction and point of application. Clear? Now this force is acting to whenever force acts, just imagine, say this is one body and force is acting like this. Means say there is one rope, cable, thread, one end is fixed here, and to to other end I will apply force, means it is a rope, right? Say this rope or cable or thread I will extend, so you can say this is a line along which force is acting. Such line along which force acts is called as what? Is called as what? Line of action of force. It is called as line of action of force. How will define line of action of force? The line along which force acts is called as what? Line of action of force. You have a single force, right? This one is one force. One more force is acting somewhere here. Is suppose number 2 F2, incline at some angle, acting at point B. There is one more force acting at point C, F3. When number of forces are greater than 1, any number of forces, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then it is called as a force system. Means what is the difference in force and force system? Force means single, more than 1, any number of forces, means what? Force system. Now a coplanar force system है. How will define coplanar force system? This one is one cable, right? Which one is lying in this plane of board, means vertical. The horizontal axis is x, vertical axis is y. So this was lying in xy plane. Line of action of force F is in xy plane. Line of action of force F2 is also in xy plane. Line of action of force means string is attached here, to other end will apply force. String lies where? In this xy plane, means line of action of force is lying in xy plane. Line of action of force F2 is also lying in xy plane, means if lines of actions of all the forces lies in one single plane, then the force system is called as what? Coplanar force system. From the name itself, coplanar means what? In one plane. Other force system called as non-coplanar force system or forces in space. Suppose this cable, this string is in xy plane, but ये जो है ना, one end is attached here and other end is connected to ceiling somewhere, means it is not in xy plane. One end is attached here, it is attached somewhere to the ground. जैसा in circus there is a tent and it is supported by various cables which are not in one plane. एक suppose vertical beam or bar रहता है, right? And then there are variety of various cables which are attached at a different location, means that ropes doesn't lies in one plane, called as what? Non-coplanar force system or forces in space or three-dimensional force system. Means basically there are how many types of force system? 2. Number 1 is what? Coplanar force system. Number 2 is what? Non-coplanar force system or three-dimensional force system or forces in space. Is how will define these force systems? So what are the types? First one, in one line I will write, just note down, right? To define a force completely, this one we have written. What is required? Magnitude, direction and point of application, right? Line of action of force means what? The line along which force acts is called as what? Line of action of force. Now next point is what? We'll write in one line. Types of force system. Note down. In maximum exams में some theory questions may be asked. So this one is one of the theory questions. What are the types of force system? What are the types of the coplanar force system, right? So types of force systems, right? Types of force system. Number 1 is what? Coplanar. Number 1 is what? Coplanar force system. How will we define coplanar force system? If lines of actions, of all the forces, lines of actions of all the forces involved in a force system, lies in one plane, lies in one plane. That may be xy plane, that may be xz plane, that may be yz plane, any plane, but all lines of actions or lines of actions of all forces must be in one plane. Then the force system, is called as coplanar, force system. Clear? So you can say this is definition or meaning of what coplanar force system. Number 2 is what? Non-coplanar. How will define this force system? Non-coplanar force system. So just now I discussed lines of action doesn't lies in one plane. Then the force system is called as what? Non-coplanar force system. Means what? If the lines of actions, of all the forces involved in a force system, doesn't lies in one plane, then the force system is called as what? Non-coplanar force system. This is also called as what? Forces in space, or this is also called as what? Three-dimensional. It is called as what? Three-dimensional force system. Clear? In this chapter you have to concentrate only on first type, coplanar force system, right? This one will study in separate chapter, three-dimensional force system. Name of chapter is what? Forces in space, right? This one there is a separate chapter, that means its theory, how we'll resolve each and everything, and problems, right? We'll solve in other chapter, right? We'll cover that one also. Now we'll concentrate on coplanar force system. So lines of action lies in one plane. Confirm over. Now what are the types of coplanar? In detail you have to study now coplanar force system. The types of coplanar force system. Coplanar force system. In coplanar force system, what are the types? There are some 3 types. Okay, this one already written. Clear? Any problem? Right? So in coplanar force system, what are the different types? Right? What are the different types? See here. Suppose I will represent what? There is one force like this. Force is acting at this point. Say magnitude of force is what? F1. This one is its direction. Say angle is what? Theta. This is one force. There is one more force acting like this. This is force F2. This is a magnitude, and its inclination with horizontal is what? Theta 2. One more force I will add here. Say this is what? F3, and its direction is what? Theta 3. Now what is important in this one? If we check lines of actions of all the forces, see F1 is having line of action something like this. Simply will extend this one. There is a cable like this. Extension of cable is what? Line of action for first force. For second force, line of action is like this, right? For third force, line of action of force is something like this. Now can you identify the lines of actions of all the forces passes through one point? Whenever lines of actions of all forces passes through one point, then the force system is called as what? concurrent force system, called as what? Concurrent force system. How will define concurrent force system? If lines of actions of all the forces passes through single point, passes through one point, then the force system is called as concurrent force system. Now what point we will get here? Through which lines of actions of all forces passes, such point is called as what? Yes, it is called as what? Point of concurrence. It is called as point of concurrence. The point through which lines of actions of all the forces passes is called as what? Point of concurrence. Clear? Now next force system is very easy to identify. Now see here. Suppose this one is one rod, right? Horizontal. There is a one rod, you can see here, vertical. And say one rod I will represent, say inclined. Okay, I represented some three rods. Now here force, say first force downward, next force upward, next force vertically upward, next force vertically downward. Forces are what? F1, F2, F3, F4. Now concentrate on lines of action. Line of action of F1 is what? Vertical. F1 like this, vertical. F2 vertical, F3 vertical, F4 vertical. Lines of actions of all forces are vertical means what? They are parallel to each other. In this case, lines of actions of all the forces are horizontal means what? Again parallel to each other, again parallel to each other, F1, F2, F3, F4. Here lines of actions all are perpendicular to this rod, means can you say lines of actions are again what? Parallel to each other, F1, F2, F3 and F4. Correct? When lines of actions of all the forces are parallel to each other, what should be name? Simple. What should be name of force system? Parallel force system. Name of force system is what? Parallel force system. In parallel force system, there are again two types. Just for information, maybe such question may be asked in oral, viva at the end of semester in mechanics. Because in almost all the universities, there is what? Viva or oral conducted at the end of semester before university exam. So such questions are expected. The parallel force system, you know, lines of actions are parallel to each other. What are the two different types? Here, this is downward, upward, upward, downward. Means they are not in same sense. Some are upward, some are downward. Unlike parallel force system, is called as what? Unlike parallel force system. If lines of actions of all forces are in same direction, all may be upward, all may be downward, all may be rightward, all may be leftward, all are in downward, all are in upward direction. So means like parallel force system. Means what are the two different types? Unlike parallel force system and like parallel force. This is a type of parallel force system, right? If directions of all forces are same, like parallel force system. Directions are in different directions, some are upward, downward, leftward, rightward, then it is called as unlike parallel force system. So this is concurrent and parallel. How will define concurrent force system? If lines of actions of all the forces passes through single point, then the force system is called as what? Concurrent force system. The point through which lines of actions of all forces passes is called as what? Point of concurrence. How will define parallel force system? So if lines of actions of all the forces are parallel to each other, then it is called as parallel force system. What are the two different types? Like parallel and unlike parallel. Like parallel means direction of all forces are same. They are parallel, but they are in same direction. When they are in different directions, right, then it is called as unlike parallel. Third type जो है, it is called as what? General force system. General force system. General force system is basically what? Non-concurrent. It is what? Non-concurrent and non-parallel. If given force system is non-concurrent, means lines of action doesn't passes through one point. Non-parallel means lines of actions are not parallel to each other. Such force system is called as what? General force system. For example, suppose this is a rod, एक rod है, right? Forces are acting like this. One force rightward, other force downward, one force something like this, one force something like this. This is not a concurrent force system. Lines of action doesn't pass through one point. They are not parallel to each other also. Say forces are what? F1, F2, F3 and F4. This is what? Non-concurrent, non-parallel. Maybe somewhere maybe some plate is given, something like this, right? And number of forces are acting. One force is acting leftward, one force is acting like this, one is inclined, other one is acting something like this. Here force is acting in vertical direction, here force is acting in some direction like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, F6. कैसा है? They are not concurrent, means non-concurrent and non-parallel. Then the force system is called as what? General force system. Up to this one clear? Now I will introduce simple key in coplanar force system. Basically what you have to do, you have to find out resultant. You have to find out what? The resultant. The meaning of resultant is what basically, right? And resultant will discuss and will solve problem in next lectures, right? This is our first lecture. So in coplanar force system, important part is what? Resultant. The resultant of what? Resultant of coplanar force system. For example, say this is a rod. Simple example I will take here. One force is acting like this, one force is acting like this. This is 500 Newton and this is what? 300 Newton, end A and end B. Suppose there is a rod, one boy is applying force in leftward direction, one boy is applying force in rightward direction. So this rod will move in which direction? So answer is simple. This is 500, this is 300. Means from 500, 300 Newton gets balanced by this 300. What remains here to 200? Means this rod will move in rightward direction due to that 200 Newton force. Can you say 200 means what? These two forces can be replaced by 200 Newton force in rightward direction. Means these two forces what I represented and this rod, and if I will replace these two forces by this single force which is at B, direction is also same, huh? They should not be leftward. Two forces can be replaced by single force, but this is not only single force, this is called as single equivalent force. Meaning of equivalent is what? Effect of these two forces and effect of this force remains same, therefore this is single equivalent force, and single equivalent force is called as what? Resultant. In short, if you want to write, it is a single, it is what? Single equivalent force. Single equivalent force. Or in one line if you want to write, how will write? Note karo, right? If all the forces involved in a force system, they can be replaced by single equivalent force without changing the effect of original force system. Means effect of original force system and effect of this single force remains same. Such single equivalent force is called as what? Resultant. Here I have taken very simple example so that easily you can find out without any resolution, right? Suppose now this one is one rod. One force is like this, 200. Here one force is acting 300, inclined at some angle 40 degrees. One force is acting in downward direction. This is what? Is 600, right? Here resultant was easy because all forces, only two forces and horizontal. Now here if you want to find out resultant means you have to replace these three forces by single equivalent force. That means you have to see what is the effect in horizontal direction, what is the effect in y direction, and then we'll combine and we'll get single equivalent force. For that one, ये जो inclined force है ना, this force you have to split along these two axes. Here you can say horizontal, vertical. You have to see instead of this one component is like this, other component is like this. This is called as component. Means effect of these two forces and effect of single force remains same. This is method of splitting up of a force. This is method of splitting up of a force along two axes without changing the effect of original force. And this method of splitting up of a force along two axes without changing the effect of original force is called as what? Resolution. Is called as what? Resolution of force. Is called as resolution of force. Right? So in next lecture we'll discuss in detail resolution of force, because resolution is very important. If you know resolution and if you will not make any mistakes in resolution, then solving problem becomes easy. Otherwise always you will get wrong answer if you have any confusion in resolution. Okay, so in this lecture we'll stop here. In next lecture what we'll do, I'll discuss resolution in detail, and in third lecture we'll discuss how to find out resultant of concurrent force system, and then we'll start solving problem. Okay, thank you, bye bye, take care.